Today's AskReddit post. Redditors that host their home on Airbnb. What has been your worst experience with a guest? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. We are live-in hosts, so we are present while guests stay in our spare room. A guest arrived and immediately announced that they had poop himself during their journey. They then marked us down for cleanliness. Mate, you poop yourself. Also a guest who found a pair of my flip-flops in a wardrobe that they should not have opened. Then poop over the bathroom floor, ruining my favorite flip-flops in the process. Also, a guest who went out drinking for 10 hours before checking in, meaning I had to collect them from the taxi, put them in bed in the recovery position, check on them when I woke up for work, then call the taxi company on their behalf when it turned out they'd lost their phone. I was going to upvote this, but I pooped my pants before I got to the end, so I downvoted it. Rented out to a group of 4 girls. Turns out they were going partying every day during their stay. I get called one day at 5 AM. It's the guard from my building telling me there's a passed out girl in the lobby's couch, puking and pissing herself. None of her friends had gone back to help her. Ruined the couch obviously. The next day they sent me a message again. Another one of the girls had sprinted to the building stairs and also pissed herself. I was messy drunk for 4 years at college and never pissed myself. None of my friends did either. WTF were they doing that meant they were pissing themselves so much? Do some freaking Kegels ladies. Dude stole my $120 sneakers and broke my TV. You're lucky. At least the guy didn't poop his pants. Yes, I did. A friend of mine rented to a girl who was convinced that there were cameras hidden all around the unit. She dismantled the lighting fixtures, picture frames, medicine cabinets, remote controls, etc. On a side note, my sister and her fiance stayed in an Airbnb that really was full of cameras. They found out because owner texted them almost immediately after they exited the seemingly private indoor hot tub and not yet returned the lid, before they even changed out of swimwear, which they luckily chose to wear. She was obviously immediately horrified because they were clearly watching them. Airbnb apologized profusely and gave their money back, along with providing a free hotel their last couple days of the trip. But still, they found a lot of cameras throughout the house, including bathrooms and bedrooms. They never thought to even look. It was the first time they'd ever vacationed without real adults. A guy I work with told this story how he hired a maid though a referral from his friend. She was great apparently and asked to stay there a couple times when he was gone. After he agreed to let her stay a few weeks when it wasn't being rented however, she ghosted him. He ended up calling the cops and they checked up on her. She was there and although nervous, everything seemed normal. She later got a hold of him and asked to stay longer. He said no, clean it and get out. He comes back randomly to his house at 5 AM a few days later to someone sleeping in his downstairs room with dirty dishes and cigarette butts everywhere. Ends up it's this maid's heroin addicted husband. He had been using it as a flop house and drug den. This guy escorted the husband out by gunpoint pantsless. The place was trashed downstairs, but apparently perfectly clean still upstairs. His TV was stolen but the husband brought it back and left it in the driveway so he didn't get charged with theft. Apparently there was little he could do about the free stay the husband took advantage of. I worked in a call center that handles some of Airbnb's customer service. So, one guest murdered 2 people in the host's home and got arrested there. Another guest was from a culture that eats iguanas and barbecued up a 7-year-old girl's pet iguana to serve to the family as thanks for hosting him. Another guest filled a mug with human shit and left it in the host's microwave. You really lose all faith in humanity working in customer service call centers. Editing to add, Airbnb requires photo evidence for all host complaints. And guess who is the first to see them? The initial customer service agent, who may only be on their first or second day taking calls. And the iguana man was forced to pay for both a new barbecue for the family and a replacement iguana. My friend's Airbnb guest taught their kitten to meow once, and then the quietest sweet needy cat turned loud and needy. 'Twas a curse that kept on giving long after he left. The cat just learned to use his words is all. My mum did this. She had some people from out of country come stay. They moved the furniture around, swapped and most mattresses, left a massive pile of dishes in the kitchen. The bathroom was all buggered, and they must have been cooking and smashing clams or oysters shell in and around the BBQ outside. I went over to help my mum out a little after work for a bit, but it was a 2-day minimum cleanup job she had to do. Mum even had to bring in a cleaner lady to help as well. Needless to say, the people who stayed didn't get their deposit back and got a file reported on them. Belp should be a word. I don't know for what, but it should be. Not a host, was a guest. We stayed in a carriage house that was split into 2 apartments in Savannah. The host was the most wonderful southern personality I've ever encountered. Around 3 AM I woke up to a loud banging noise, like someone trying to break down a door. It got loud and louder, and eventually sounded violent. This went on for 20 minutes before my GF got out of bed and politely asked the neighboring guests to be quiet. They remained quiet for another 20 minutes and then they were at it again. This time much louder. Drunkenly they locked themselves out and decided that breaking the door down was their only option. The next morning when we left, the deadbolt was knocked out. The entire door frame was stripped off and the door was smashed to bits. We felt so bad for the host. It was going into a holiday and she had to cancel the next guest stay because of the damage. Stupid drunk college kids. I clean for 1. Saw some guests pull in. 7 people get out. Several things wrong with that. The car could only seat 5. When they booked they said there were only going to be 2 guests staying there. They complained the whole time they were there about how things didn't work. Wasn't true. Thankfully I never cleaned up after the 7 people. The place also only had 3 bedrooms. That's illegal too. There are almost too many to recall, but among the top ones was a bridesmaid who got drunk at a wedding and proceeded to violently assault her boyfriend BC he wouldn't propose. She threw him into 3 walls, all requiring extensive repairs, which led to her arrest. The quality of guests has declined sharply as Airbnb has grown. 3 walls? And they all had like massive divots in them, I'm guessing? I work for pest control and you unknowingly open your home to bed bugs and other pests, aka tourists. Not a host, but I stayed at an Airbnb that rented 2 rooms. I was in bed and hear the other guest, a man and women, return. They're loud and drunk, but nothing crazy. About 10 minutes later I hear what I thought was them having intercourse, but then quickly realize it's someone getting hit. The host and I both hear this. The host starts knocking on the door, asking what's going on and to open the door. The woman opens the door and her lip is split wide open. She's bleeding all down her shirt. The guy is in the room, but runs out with a backpack and leaves. He's taken both of their cell phones and wallets. The police show up and everyone gives statements. They found him walking down the road and he found different accommodations at the police station. I slept fine. The room was Harry Potter themed, so I still left 5 stars. Not my cabin, but in Tahoe they did something with Airbnbs where people could offer them to people affected by the Paradise Fire. My friend's family, out of the kindness of their heart, opened their cabin, and someone who apparently hadn't even been affected by the fire used a fake name, and they stripped the cabin of anything that could be seen as valuable. His grandpa's ice axe, snowshoes, all kinds of other old stuff like that. They even took all the pots, pans, silverware, plates, everything. People who take advantage like that are the worst. I hope they get what's coming to them. Not as colorful as Menet, but had an Italian lass stay in my flat once and she was crackers. She claimed it was filthy and bought all new bedsheets and paper plates despite the fact we had our regular cleaner in the day before. I've since learned that Italians are obsessive cleaners. Really pissed me off as we went out of our way to welcome her with a list of local amenities and attractions written in Italian by an Italian pal. Italians aren't obsessive cleaners. I stayed in an Airbnb in Italy once and not only were it mildly dusty, but all the dishes and cups had food stuck to them. I could have dealt with that, but there was also a European wasp nest on the balcony. Man was mad that his wife said I was attractive, so he spent all weekend taking up her deckers in my toilets. That's when you remove the top of the toilet tank, take a dump, then close it back up. Sob. I practically invented that move in college. Liar. Practically. These ladies got locked out because all three didn't bring any of the spare keys. I had to leave a meeting since they demanded I let them inside. Since I left them all spares and my original, had to climb up 2 stories by building a makeshift Marv from Home Alone style stack of boxes and break in my own apartment to open the door from the inside for them. They gave me my only negative rating out of about 20. I'm not old enough to rent a home, but this comes from my dad. Short and simple. When we came back home we found a lot of blood in the kitchen and a cut off thumb. And my dad's bedroom smelled like someone had intercourse for at least 2 hours. Someone had intercourse for at least 2 hours. LOL. I had a weird one where the guest wore the towel provided by me the entire time she was at the house. She wore it while cooking. She wore it outside eating her dinner. Bitch, it's not a goddamn onsen. It wasn't even partial nudity that bothered me, but the overuse of my towel for unintended wear and tear. Turns out finicky Karen was worried about animal fur on her clothes or something. I made it clear I had pets. What a nutter. Bro, it's a ducking towel that you provided for guests to use. Carpets, jizzed. Curtains, jizzed. Dining table, jizzed. Sink, jizzed. Sheets, somehow survived unjizzed. Is that bad aim or a performance piece? All I thought was, wow, that's some endurance. Fuckers took an unopened pound of Starbucks ground coffee from the fridge, so nothing of value was lost, was for other guests. So maybe to someone someday. Maybe Mayo. 2 guys from Wales came in for the night. We made it clear that we only offered a room with a double bed to sleep in, and toilet of course. So no parties and no disrespectful behavior. Found them the next day passed out in the kitchen where they puked in and over everything. Even the plants. Even in the cat's litter box. It was awful. I kicked him out immediately. Wales? Wales. Clearly. This story one client told me. He had a traveling job, so he used to give his home. Once he gave out his home to a couple, a 29-30-year-old husband and wife. After he returned from his tour and entered the house, he found everything neat and clean and in more than a perfect condition except one thing. His property is 2-bedroom, hall and kitchen. He said that there was some really bad and foul smell. He thought it might be coming from outside, so he sprayed some freshener and went to his room. But on 3rd day it became even worse. He tried to check and then he opened the other room. Room was nice and clear, but smell there was very strong. He opened the closet. In the bottommost section of closet he found something that was spine-chilling and shocking. There were some occult symbols, and on one of that was a dyed pigeon covered with vermilion. Some tantra or black magic happened there, and then he had to spend few bucks on dealing with that occult. I know a girl that did it, and guests broke a globe and glued it back together with all the wrong countries joined together. They also spilled a pint of water on the rug and just left it, which made a big circle watermark on the wooden floor. She was a bit fussy about hygiene, so I was surprised that she didn't mind loads of strangers doing all sorts in her bed. It is baffling. Clearly the lure of money is great for some people. A couple rented my home and did an obscene amount of drugs and flushed some leftover down my toilet, which clogged it. Oh, they also stole my prescription painkillers. Worth mentioning, I have 2 friends who own a few in a mountain town in SoCal. They say the cleanest and most respectful people are when they rent it to porn companies. LOL. They say families will legitimately trash the place, yet the porn companies always clean up. I used Airbnb to rent out a military camper truck I built. I only had one guest and one horrible experience. I will never be a host again. The first guest was on BNB for a couple years and had a few reviews from hosts that were good. Anyways, the guest forced open my RV gate, parked his vehicle in my backyard, and then 3 more guests, only 1 guest was booked, and a dog. I had a no pet policy. Proceed into my motorhome. The next day comes and it's time for them to leave, but they won't leave. I had to sit outside the door and wait for them to get ready. They begged to stay, but I had a very strong feeling something was wrong. Inside, I found very short straws with burnt ends and burned aluminum foil around the camper. I figured out that they were probably freebasing heroin. They also managed to completely fill up the grey water tank and black water tank. Later, I found out that the rental car was most likely stolen and they were hiding it from the police. Airbnb was pathetic in the lack of customer support during the experience and after. Never hosted, but I stayed at a rental house a few years back while visiting my wife's family out of town. We stayed at this nice little cottage style house with plenty of amenities. There was a hot tub, BBQ, nice outdoor patio area, etc. We didn't use any of it because we were only there to sleep. We get home and receive an email from the owner that she is keeping the security deposit because we destroyed the BBQ and broke several deck boards on her patio. She didn't believe that we hadn't even touched these areas. There was plenty of back and forth before she agreed to drop it and give back 90% of the deposit. Till, Airbnb guests do not like to use toilets. My parents had an 18-year-old girl stay with 3 us army boys she'd never met prior. Found condoms in the bin, fridge, pool, water fountain, garden, nightstand, and the kicker one hanging on the chandelier. My aunt rented out her house through Airbnb. The tenants were employees of a Canadian porn company. They shot a porn video in every room of her house. Former next door neighbor was renting out their apartment on Airbnb. You can do that in a rental. One of the first set of guests would blasted the stereo till all hours of the night and left the apartment trashed. Another set of guests would fight all the time. They got into a screaming match and another neighbor called the cops on them. The worst though was the entitled couple who insisted my apartment was their rental. They walked in on me watching TV in nothing but my underwear. I had to physically shove them out my door and they had the nerve to call the cops on me. Thank God the landlord finally put the kibosh on tenants renting to Airbnb. Before the COVID, we rented both our spare rooms as Airbnb. The worst that has happened to us was a girl got a little glitter on the bathroom floor and a guest cooked their vegan dinner and the place smelled like a lentils mess for a couple hours. My stepmother's brother put their holiday home up for Airbnb last year, but only lasted for a couple weeks. Turns out their first customers was a couple of young female intercourse workers that were using his place as a brothel. They only found out when their cleaner popped round in the evening after reports of a very large amount of activity by their neighbors. What is with people just pooping themselves or on things? How the fuck does that happen? What is wrong with people? My friend owns an Airbnb place. Really nice 2-bedroom house. Always has guests. Highly rated. He had a group of young adults book the place. They were only there for 2 nights. On the first night, he had a noise complaint from his neighbors, so he went round to talk to them the following morning. When he got there, he found at least 20 people in the house and around the house passed out. The house was pretty much destroyed. Broken tables, broken chairs, smashed windows. He found puke, poop and beers bottles everywhere. He went around waking everyone up and telling them all to leave. He contacted Airbnb to tell them the situation. A few days later, he had an email from Airbnb stating that his place had been suspended from the site due to allegations that he was accused of inappropriate behavior towards some of the female members. Luckily, some of the guests came forward and apologized, saying that nothing like that happened. Some of the other guests were trying to get out of paying the fine, so made up the story. My friend went through hell for months. Not an Airbnb wonder, but I went to a party with lots of drinking and smoking and the angry owner showed up and kicked everybody out. The people who rented the house for the party said they were a married couple with a baby. Face with tears of joy. That's not funny. Other way around, but one time me and my family stayed at an Airbnb in Canada and left it completely spotless, almost perfect. Better than how we found it, but they left us a bad review and refused to give us our deposit back. Left the toilet clogged and lots of hair ever ducking wear. Wet towels on the bed. That was the last time we put our place on Airbnb because the rent will just pour down to the maintenance fee if we keep having poopty guests. Hosted what we thought was a family of 4 for a long weekend. Turned out to be a couple of party planners who invited 280 people, according to the police report filed that night, and left nearly every room and fixture with some type of damage. Also found several types of drug paraphernalia and broken glass all around the house. Worst part is that they had invited 3 huge dudes to literally prevent us, homeowners, or any neighbors from meeting with the people whose names were on the reservation or going inside that night, leading neighbors and then us to call the cops later on. This is in a generally quiet neighborhood with a ton of families and retirees. 2 things. Someone stole my favorite mug. Local government started taxing bombers and now we can't. Neither are exceptionally awful, but they still happened. Edit. Grammar. I don't host on Airbnb, but I live next door to one and it is the nightmare that never ends. My neighbor does Airbnb. His worst guest was a guy that threw a tantrum and wrecked his TV because a woman didn't want to talk to him. Guest then spent an hour outside in his birthday suit crying and sulking. Not a host, but at an Airbnb in Anaheim I was woken up in the night by the owner's wife and the connected bathroom staring at us. It was creepy as hell. Rented out a room for a foreign couple arriving a day before check-in. They called me and asked why I was not opening the door. I was at work. To be a good host I ended up leaving work to go home and clean the apartment, wash the sheets and make everything ready, as it would take a couple of hours to get ready. I offered to buy the guests coffee in a local cafe while waiting. After a stressful day I managed to get everything ready for the guest and they could check in a day early. After all this they still ended up giving me 1 star in check-in rating. My parents recently had an incident. The house was rented by someone using a false identity. They threw a huge banger at the house with underage guests and, according to neighbors, there were guests having intercourse in the yard. We ended up finding out after several guests broke into the neighborhood pool and broke the fence and a window at the community building, leading to the cops being called. The house was trashed. Cigarettes and joints all over. Alcohol spilled on the floors in nearly every room. Broken cell phones. Over $100 worth of food they bought left out. They broke into the locked cabinet that had cleaning supplies and extra linens in it. We found all of the kitchen knives in the bedroom closet as well as cut up bars of soap. Luckily the damage to the house was fairly minimal. Screens from the windows popped out. Small hole in the wall. Broke the locked cabinet. Pulled washing machine out from the wall. People are ignorant. My stepdad does Airbnb. And one time, he took a lady's son out fishing on his boat for free, and she rated him 3 stars for the house looking bigger in the pictures, even though the square footage was listed on the page. One guy that was staying with us was an alcoholic. Didn't really figure it out until it was too late. He pooped and pissed all over the room. It looked like the poop demon from Dogma got a hold of the room. There were empty beer cans all over the floor. The Airbnb guest sleeping in the room next to him noticed the foul odor and let us know. We threatened to call the cops and thus he left immediately. We had to rip up all the flooring and refloor the room. Edit. We submitted a claim to Airbnb with pictures accompanying the complaint. They reimbursed us for all the flooring and installation. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.